Today at Manchester Theatres, I am here chatting once again with JOE MEIGHAN, who is the artistic director at the Altrincham Garrick. Now, Joe joined the Garrick back in 2020, and he has worked alongside the operations director, Sarah Riley. They have put on some spectacular and amazing shows and events at the Garrick. They do everything from live screenings to pantomimes to play readings. They do music events, music artists, tribute bands, put on full-scale musicals such as Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, really thrilling plays such as Girl on the Train, and they have now brought another thrilling cult classic, Let the Right One In, which is going to be coming from the 5th to the 10th of February. So we're going to be chatting all about it. So thank you, Joe, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So Let the Right One In. It is not like a normal kind of vampire story, is it? It is vampires, but it's not. I mean, so tell us all about it.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, you've kind of introduced the main theme, I guess, of vampires. So, I guess at the real heart of Let the Right One In, it's a play about two misfits in a community who find each other and come together in quite a beautiful way, actually, set against the backdrop of what is far from beautiful, very dark themes. To these two characters, one of them, Oskar, who is a teenager who is being severely, brutally bullied at school, doesn't know where he fits into society. His home life is very, very difficult, and so really he's become a loner. And he confines and finds in this girl, at the beginning of friendship, but then something much more than that. However, this girl, Eli, has been a teenager for a very, very long time, and that is because they are a vampire. It's interesting because vampire is the word that we use all the time in the rehearsal room, and yet it's not once mentioned in the script at all. You know, I mean, we know that is what Eli is, and yet it's kind of the unspoken secret in a way. But I think what really drew me to, I saw the original production once it transferred from National Theatre Scotland into the West End. I saw that and thought it was incredible. And then I've seen a couple of productions since, and although ours is quite different, you know, because of the fact that it's for our stage and it's for our time now, and every time you approach a show there's something different about it, isn't there? But I think at its root there's just this amazing story, and also a horror story, which is quite rare on stage. You don't get to do that very often, so it's been good fun. It's been a challenge, especially with some of the more brutal and bloody moments. There's quite a few jump scares in there.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because I am not the best when it comes to jumpy stuff, but this is like we said, it is a vampire thing, even though it's not mentioned. It is,
yeah,
but it isn't just that, is it? It's more than that, and it's almost like that's kind of a tool to tell the stories and discover themes of isolation and friendship and acceptance, because you've mentioned this friendship, but what also intrigues me, you touched on a little bit, is that when you hear vampire and relationships, you always think of this passion and this sexual like drive and all of this, and it's not. It is so tender and beautiful, isn't it, the relationship between Eli and Oscar?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and obviously, they really are, to me anyway, and to our production, they're kind of the other half of the other's soul in a way. You know, they really find and complement each other, and in the other person they find the thing that they have felt is missing in their life. You know, and especially for Eli, who we don't know huge amounts of Eli's backstory at all. What we do know is that she is a vampire, and so and that she is very old, even though she looks very young, and so we can only imagine that what Eli has been through has been, you know, quite traumatic and difficult as well. And so I think there's something great about, perhaps she is centuries old and yet she finds this person in this century, in this way. I mean, the play is we've kind of set it in the year 83, and the novel and the play and the various film adaptations are sort of around the 80s. There's no kind of real hard and fast timeline to it, but we've kind of rooted it in the 80s. We've left it in its original setting in a little suburb in Stockholm, and so it's just been great to kind of discover that world as well, and to see where this story, you think Vampire Tale and you think Count Dracula on a hill in a spooky castle, and
it's not,
and it's so far from that. It's great, really.
And there's a lovely moment where Oscar kind of realizes something that Eli has done. Try not to give too much away. Realizes something that Eli has done, and is like in this existential crisis of like, well, they've done this one bad thing, but then they've done all these amazing other 100 wonderful things, and kind of has to balance that out and look at something so awful almost as a character flaw, and accept that nobody's perfect.
Well, absolutely, and I think that's one of the key themes of it, really, is that it's about dealing with relationships and dealing with people's flaws, whatever the flaws may be. And yes, it's really soul connections at their root, and it's very exciting. And it's funny, people kind of hone in on the blood and the terror and the murder side of things. Everyone in the various departments, because obviously we're making costumes that have certain bits of trickery, and same with the set and that kind of stuff. And everyone's going, gosh, what is this play? And it's like, yeah, but actually you'll be swept away by the beauty of it, even though there's this really dark background to it, and there's these really awful moments of terror. And actually, we're quite excited about the terror because you don't get to do it very, very often. You can be really bold with that, but then there's this really sentimental and intimate route to it all.
So is that difficult? Because, like you say, that it juxtaposes itself throughout, because it is so brutal and bold, but it is so tender and beautiful. Is that when you're because you're directing it? Is that a really tricky balance to kind of find?
It is, and that thing that you do in the early stages of preparing to direct something is you kind of look at the high and the low moments, and how the pacing may work. Obviously, all that really happens in the room with the actors, but and I think for a while I was trying to force a tempo and a pace that isn't there, just because the way Jack Thorne's written the play, there's almost this musicality, this rhythm to it, which is slow and pulled, and you think, oh, well, we've got to try and fight that somehow, because a whole evening of that is. But actually, once you really start to realize the scenes, and he's a fantastic playwright, but you're really thinking, well, actually, this is almost like an opera. This is almost like a piece of music that has been composed in a particular way to flow the way it flows. And like Shakespeare, actually, you learn not to really fight those rhythms and to let the rhythms do the talking. So in many ways, I think we all, certainly speaking for myself, you go into rehearsals with one view of how the process is going to go, and actually it's gone a very different way, and that's been fascinating, and that's been really enjoyable.
That it is, because it's like you can think what you think you're going to think. Which isn't very articulate, but then when a play is so good, it's just going to go, no, this is what we are, and it's going to take over.
Absolutely. And obviously we did an awful lot of work with the set designer Steph Nyland, and trying to work out how it would look. And I had some very clear ideas, Steph had some very clear ideas, and so that's always a very exciting part, where you're throwing that around. And with a play as good as this, that you can present it in various different ways. And also, we talking of music, we do have a score that's been composed for this production by Mark Goggins, who does a lot of musical direction here. And so that really is bringing sort of a cinematic feel to the whole thing, really. Which we felt was needed, especially for that horror. People know the horror genre as film and novels, less so on stage. And so we wanted it to be accessible, but also it's an epic tale. And so it kind of needed an epic score to go with it. And Mark has absolutely delivered that. So we've been having some fun with kind of finding a physical language that goes with that music, and so there's bits
Yeah.
of movement that connects the piece now, and yeah, it's been really enjoyable so far.
Well, you've mentioned there the set, so I was going to ask you about this because I mean, my mind just blows even thinking about you've got vampires like flying and jumping, but like you mentioned earlier on, it's set in Sweden and but it goes from like swimming pools to hospitals to sweet
Yeah.
shops to train carriages. And I know that you get a lot of, you've got a fabulous set and props department and you get a lot of it done in-house. Do you kind of walk in and do they kind of just go, no, Joe, no, go away. We're not like you floored us with Chitty. No, just go away.
It has been a little bit like that. And I think the thing with Let the Right One In is we possibly underestimated how much behind the scene work there was going to be. You know, we kind of felt, well, it'll be a set that comprises of all these elements. And once we've nailed that down, it'll be all right. But of course, there's a lot of blood every night on this set. And so costumes and set, there's a maintenance to them.
Yes.
And then what we have found is this sort of dry and wet zones needed backstage because of, you know, keeping certain props and characters away from blood or whatever. And so that's been like, oh, right. So we need an area here that can't be touched by that. And so all of a sudden it became almost like a construction site going, right, where does this go? Where does that go? But yeah, I'm really proud of what we've achieved with the set, and as you say, that the swimming pool is kind of quite an important part of the play, and so it was about incorporating that into the overall design and the feel. And I think when you look at it now, and you know it's already on stage, and we're kind of just doing the final bits of dressing to it. I think it really has an atmosphere now that is really part and parcel of the play and what we're trying to do with the play. So I think what's been great is the team have complemented what we're doing really well. But yeah, it's had its challenges, definitely.
I can imagine. And is another challenge with something like this the fight scenes and making them look realistic, because they're so difficult because you've got, like we've said, there's really serious bullying going on. So there's that kind of fighting, but then there's this otherworldly fighting with the vampires. So it's not just like you can go, yeah, we'll just do some stage combat. It's so complex, even just for that.
Yeah. I mean that that was the challenge. Is, you know, we've got this main character, Eli, who may look human but is not human, and so we had to say, well, how does Eli fight? How does Eli move? And there are versions of Eli. There are versions which are more human, and there are versions that are not. And Chloe Arrowsmith, who's playing the part of Eli, brilliantly, amazingly. You know, we've kind of spoken about levels, and at that point Eli is a bit more over here than over here, and how does that just sit in the body? And very, even in the audition process, actually, Chloe kind of showcased a great sense of connection to the character physically. And we've really kind of pushed that now and explored that, and she's terrifying, actually. She really is. There was a call the other day where we did a scene, and at the end of it, me and a few of the actors that were there sort of all went, ooh, you know, oh God, that was a bit. She ceases to be Chloe and has gone somewhere else. So yeah, that has been a challenge, but it's been good fun, actually. It's been interesting to kind of work with those parameters and to go, okay, well, sky's the limit a bit, actually. So what can we do? You know, if you're doing something like Romeo and Juliet with the fight scenes, once you kind of set the world, is it traditional dress? Is it modern day? Is it, you know, about knife crime? Is it about gun crime or whatever? You kind of set yourself the parameters of what the weapon is or what the tools are and what that fight language is. Whereas with Let the Right One In, as you say, there's the bullying side of things that, you know, people will recognize. But then there is this kind of other physical language going on alongside it, and that's been interesting to explore that.
Yeah, I bet it has. We've been mentioning blood throughout, so there is a lot right from the off. So is there some sort of suggested age with this, would you maybe say, so that we're not kind of scarring people?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of content warnings on our, once you go to our website and you access the page for Let the Right One In, there's quite a lot of content warnings there, because some of the themes are very uncomfortable and are difficult, and are quite extreme versions of those themes as well. So, we want to make sure that people coming are uncomfortable enough to feel the genre, but equally are kind of safe in the boundaries of what they're wanting to access. But yeah, we've kind of said it's a 14 plus age rating, really. The characters in our version, Oskar and Eli, are about 16. And there are accessible traits with the high school bullying, and in a way, it's not kind of preachy or moral led, but that is part of the text, really. And so it kind of should be seen by a younger audience, but similarly there is some bad language and there's some very adult themes, and so we kind of said 14 plus is our recommendation.
I was going to say they're probably more prepared for it than the likes of me, to be honest, because I jump at anything.
There is
they're desensitized, aren't they?
I think in the wake of certain things on Netflix and stuff, there's a newfound appreciation for this kind of art form, really, and that's probably why Let the Right One In has found a new popularity in the last couple of years, is because we have kind of tapped into that darker horror thriller danger genre a little bit more in just the kind of regular series and films we're starting to see again. So I think it's got that appeal to it as well now.
So what are you, before we go, what are you most proud of or looking forward to with this show? Because it is just amazing.
Yeah, well, I think we like to offer something for everyone at Altrincham Garrick. That's really one of the things that we strive for, But I think this is even more of a unique package in a way. I've certainly never done any kind of horror thriller to this extent before, and I've never known us to do something. We have produced darker plays. Barry Purvis directed a fantastic version of Nick Dear's Frankenstein 2 years ago, and obviously that had its blood and gore by the very nature of what it is, but that was a bit more of a kind of psychological understanding of human nature and the humanity's need to science bettering God or something, whereas I think Let the Right One In it is a thrilling ride for an audience, and it evokes sort of a visceral connection. And I think there are some jump scares, and I think there are some moments where people will be quite freaked out, and that shared experience of the theatre with that emotion, I think, is going to be really exciting.
It will be, and I cannot wait for it to come. I wish you all the best with it. Let the Right One In is going to be at the Altrincham Garrick from the 5th to the 10th of February. Go and get your teeth stuck into it. Thank you so much, Joe, and all the best.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Bye.